very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and it's been a pleasure to come to the end of this very important debate. There has been some powerful arguments put forward by right honourable members, which I hope the government will listen to. I place on record my concern as to what the outcome of this inquiry will actually be, because there are some basic schoolboy errors that we could learn from Iraq. We don't need an inquiry to understand where mistakes have been made. We're now leaning on this inquiry to tell us, and I wonder why the government isn't actually heeding some of those issues that we could have already learnt and could be put in effect in other theatres of operation. We know, for example, that the justification for war in the first place was based on what the Americans wanted to do, with General Franks, Tommy Franks, being told back in November 2001 he was in charge of CENTCOM, having just succeeded in launching the invasion in Afghanistan, told by President Bush to make preparations for a potential war in Iraq. We know that the evidence of mass destruction was based on a single source of an Iraqi chemical officer who went into a German refugee camp. It was never authorized, it was never actually seconded, and it ended up being translated into a 45-minute claim of tactical weapons which possibly could have hit Cyprus. We're aware that honourable members in this House voted upon Resolution 1441. That didn't allow the invasion of Iraq. What it allowed was to go back to a previous resolution, Resolution 678, written 11 years earlier, in 1990, to allow the use of force. There again, huge mistakes were made, which I hope the inquiry will actually pull out. But we know this already. Likewise, walking so blindly into a war with Iraq when actually it turned out to be a massive distraction to another operation which had already started in Afghanistan, which is still ongoing. Madam Deputy Speaker, everybody has repeated the need to learn lessons. That's the point of an inquiry. And my argument is we know some of these lessons already, and yet we're failing to actually recognise them. Once the decision was made to go to Iraq, I was astonished to learn, but pleased of the honesty, that the Right Honourable Lady for Birmingham Ladywood actually admitted in this House, Madam Deputy Speaker, that there was no plan. There was no plan from DFID as to what to do once the war fighting started. We had the invasion. I won't give way in a second. I will give way in a minute. But I just want to finish this point, and then I'll obviously allow the Right Honourable Lady. The invasion took place in March 2003. There was huge euphoria, of course, with the liberation, particularly in Basra, considering what had happened with Saddam Hussein. And then, in April 2003, and I had this discussion with General Robin Brims, who was a commander of one UK armoured division, who then said that he went into the middle of Basra and the dust had settled, and he knew straight away that things were going to go pear-shaped, and that the gangs would start to be formed, the militias would start to be created, simply because there was a massive vacuum, because there was not a plan. And he didn't know what to do then, apart from watch, very sadly, the security situation actually deteriorate. I give way to the Honourable Lady.
Just to make clear, I have not said there were no plans. There were detailed plans made with the State Department, the UN, other international agencies. But the Honourable Gentleman is from the military. DFID and the humanitarian agencies can't bring peace in an occupied territory. That's a military job. I really don't honour this attempt to pass over to the humanitarian agencies the responsibility for the chaos after the invasion.
She's actually making my point for me, Madam Deputy Speaker. Whose responsibility is it to make peace? Is it the military? The military provide the security on top of the hill. Something else has to happen in the village below to make sure that the reconstruction takes place, the schools are built, the electricity is turned on, all these other things that actually turn into nation building. That isn't the role of the military, though I'd like it to be. It was the actual responsibility of DFID. And the Honourable Lady actually agreed or admitted to sending a diktat round to her directors in her department saying, do nothing, we're not even sure that this war is legal. I admire her consistency in the matter, but it doesn't help anybody in military uniform going over the start line, being sent over the start line by this government, to then realise that once the war fighting has stopped, we don't have a plan to keep the peace. And that's where things went so pear-shaped. Moving on from there as well, by 2004, the number of deaths, civilian deaths, had risen to 20,000 a year, and the number of military, UK and British deaths had risen to 800 a year. And by 2007, the deterioration was so bad that we'd actually become part of the problem itself. We'd gone from being liberators to being occupiers. And a personal friend of mine who was leading 2nd Battalion of the Rifles was then made to leave with a tail between his legs to depart from Basra Palace because he'd become part of the problem. And he had to return to the actual comfort of the airbase, never to participate in proper patrolling again. Why? Because we did not have the plan for peace. And that is the big question, the big lesson to be learned by this government, which doesn't need an inquiry. And that is the point I'm actually trying to stress. And we are making exactly the same mistakes, I'm afraid, again, in Afghanistan. It should not be, Madam Deputy Speaker, that we actually spend 3 weeks war fighting and 6 years in failed stabilisation. We must look at the type of warfare we're now involved in. It's not cold warfare anymore, it's actually counterinsurgency. And we have to recognise that we're not actually very good at it. General Petraeus, Madam Deputy Speaker, said it's no longer good enough simply to defeat the enemy. You have to go further than that. You have to enable the local. And until we get that into our heads, we will continue to fail in the way we're doing. And as I stress, we can't expect the military to do it at the moment. They're not trained to do it, nor are they equipped. It's a different type of equipment that you need to do stabilisation post-conflict operations. And as we've heard, DFID doesn't do it either, because they do what it says on the tin. They tackle poverty. So there is a void, Madam Deputy Speaker, a huge void that needs to be filled if we are wanting to win wars, but actually go on and win the peace as well. At the moment, we are winning the war, but losing the peacekeeping. And these are the lessons that we can actually learn without the actual need for an inquiry. And I do hope this inquiry looks at what Whitehall actually did. I would like to see a huge overhaul, Madam Deputy Speaker, as to the way we approach post-conflict operations. It is no good in trying to get soldiers to maintain a level of security when they see the demise of the infrastructure around them with nobody willing to step forward and do that job. I would advocate, though, that in that fragile window of opportunity, the very few weeks to months that you have, when the dust settles after the war fighting is finished, that is when you want to win over the hearts and minds. I'll give way to my honourable friend.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend who's making a very powerful case with which I strongly agree. But would he also agree with me that it's absolutely vital to have a proper civil justice system which gets put in place quickly so that you don't have the sort of situation you have in Afghanistan now where the Taliban are left to provide the judging and the resolution of disputes?
My honourable friend makes such a valid point. It is this level of detail that needs to be looked at. It's not just the justice system, it's the training of the police. It's actually training of the armed forces as well. Who is now doing this? It's our armed forces because there's an absence of anybody else. So let's bite the bullet and recognise that our military are actually in the best place to do this. Our Royal Engineers are capable of making the roads. They're capable of actually building back the schools and so forth. They're capable of showing the locals that they mean business, they want to help, and then they want to go home. They do not want to hang around in a conflict zone for 6 years and watch the security situation actually deteriorate. What happened in Iraq, Madam Deputy Speaker, was appalling. And I'm afraid Whitehall should take the blame for this. Because as the security situation deteriorated, because nobody bothered to try and fill the power vacuum, who came in to Iraq? Al-Qaeda. They were the ones that then made their home and made the job of trying to provide security, to keep security all the more tougher. These are the lessons, Madam Deputy Speaker. Do we need an inquiry? Yes, of course it was help. But boy, we could have learnt these lessons many, many moons ago. I stress, I urge, and I'm pleased that the Secretary of State for Defence is actually here. We need to wake up to our capability of what we're doing. The Americans have woken up to this. We haven't. And until we do so, we will struggle to win these campaigns after the war fighting has actually finished. Madam Deputy Speaker, I believe in the long history of British engagements, Iraq was far from our finest hour. This was no fault of our armed forces, who actually can hold their heads up high. But the blame actually falls squarely on Whitehall, who failed to plan for peace. We cannot blame the Americans totally, and I'm aware now of people like Colin Powell, who had 15 737s on the runway with all the reconstruction gear and the army of civil servants. But Basra was our responsibility, and we failed to actually make the effort to make the actual reconstruction work. I hope this inquiry into the war will actually exonerate our military forces from mismanaging the actual peace. They, at the moment, are feeling the blame, and they cannot say this publicly, but they are deeply angry at the fact that they've seen such a demise of the security situation supposedly under their watch. And I hope that these blatant errors will be recognised and acknowledged by the inquiry, so lessons can be learnt, which I'm afraid are already started to be repeated in Afghanistan. There is a gaping hole, Madam Deputy Speaker, in our post-conflict stabilisation capability, and I hope this inquiry actually expedites the desire to fix it.